Hi, my name is Chris Brennan, and I'm here at the United Astrology Conference in Chicago this week doing interviews with different astrologers in order to see who's giving lectures on different topics, what they're talking about, and what some of the things are that people are talking about at the conference. So joining me today is Demetra George. Thanks for joining me.
Yeah, hi, Chris.
Hey.
It's wonderful being at another UAC with everyone.
Yeah, so how many UACs have you been to?
Well, I've been to every one of them.
Okay.
And the very first one in 1986, my book Asteroid Goddesses had been published a week before.
Wow.
I was an unknown astrologer at that time, and my publisher, who happened to be one of the organizers due to a cancellation, was able to get me into a speaking slot. So that started my UAC adventures, and I've been fortunate enough to attend every one of them since then.
Wow. So you brought, there was a stack of your books there at the first conference, and it was in 1986 in New Orleans?
No, in San Diego.
San Diego, okay.
Yeah, it was June of 1986.
Okay.
And Douglas Block, who's my editor, we were able to get a table in a trade show. And we offered free asteroid placements and readings for anyone who wanted to come.
Wow.
So they'd come with their charts, and we'd look up the asteroids in the book and do mini readings. And then we were able to sell the book to 15% of the people who came to the conference.
Wow, walked away with a copy
With
of
walked
Asteroid
away, yes.
Goddesses.
So
So it was
that-
a huge success.
Yes, to everyone's shock.
Sure.
Yeah.
And that sort of launched the asteroids basically
Yes,
in the astrological
definitely.
community.
Yes.
Okay.
You know, of course, Eleanor Bach had published an asteroid ephemeris 10 years earlier in 1973, actually more than 10 years. But with Asteroid Goddesses being immediately disseminated into the larger community, it was the time of the rebirth of women's spirituality, and it was in the air for such a notion to capture the imaginations of the public.
Sure. Okay. And so speaking of publishing, you actually have made a big announcement at this conference that your next book, your long-awaited textbook on Hellenistic astrology, is going to come out by the end of the year.
Yes, absolutely. The name now is Ancient Astrology in Theory and Practice, a manual of traditional techniques. And it will be coming out in two volumes. Volume 1 will be Assessing Planetary Condition, and Volume 2 will be Delineating Planetary Meaning.
Okay.
So it's very much a workbook is a main component of it, of how to take the principles of traditional astrology and actually apply them in the chart. There's 2 examples we worked through with every technique, and then a guided program for people to replicate the process with their own chart.
Okay. So it's sort of similar to one of your earlier books or your second book, which
Yeah.
is Astrology for Yourself.
Yes.
Okay. But a sort of more of a traditional or Hellenistic approach
Exactly.
to that same.
Yeah, so in many ways it's a wonderful complement to Chris's book on Hellenistic astrology, where Chris offers the big picture, especially with the philosophy and the history and all the various basic concepts. And then I'm taking that, and that this is what it actually looks like when it's put into a chart that's the same chart from beginning to end, and deriving the meaning.
Sure.
So
yeah, I'm really excited.
yeah,
about that.
so that's exciting that those 2 companion pieces will be available.
Yeah, they're really going to go well together, and I
Yeah.
feel like that's going to complete some of that work that was started 20 years ago, where you were one of the first people. I think you were one of the first subscribers to Project Hindsight.
I
right?
was the first subscriber to Project Hindsight. And then in the year 2001, when Kepler College had been going for a year, and we were teaching the history of ancient astrology, we realized through a booth at the NORWAC conference that Project Hindsight was now offering retreats in the techniques of Hellenistic astrology based on Robert Schmidt's translations. And so I attended that and was so taken with the beauty and the elegance and the depth of the system that I felt that that program should be offered to the students at Kepler College. And so I was able to arrange with Kepler to add it to their curriculum. and Bob Schmidt and Alan White helped me develop the first course in Hellenistic astrology that was taught.
Right.
So then it was from those beginnings that now, almost 20 years later, the book has come to its completion.
Right, that's really exciting. It feels like Hellenistic astrology, with the publication of your book and mine last year, is finally going to be out there and much more mainstream. Even though the translation of the text started in the 1990s, it's only now that people have been using it long enough to be able to publish works to show how to use it in practice today.
Yes,
Yeah.
right. So this will help ground it into practical application.
Sure.
And today I spoke with someone who, this was their first astrology conference. They had just started studying a year ago, and they have realized that the Hellenistic is the kind of approach that they want to specialize and continue in. So that was exciting also.
Right.
New astrologers just entering in, having this sense of realization that this is the direction, and I think this is the wave of this renaissance of astrology in this century will be very much informed by the wisdom of the ancients.
Yeah, and that's blowing my mind, because both of us we learned modern astrology first, and then we had to go through that process of unlearning certain things in order to learn Hellenistic astrology, whereas the idea of somebody starting with Hellenistic first from the beginning is really interesting, and I'm curious how that will turn out and where it will go.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. There'll be a whole new revisioning of astrology in 50 years from now.
Sure. So, and what are you lecturing on here at the conference?
Well, I've done one lecture already, which is Hellenistic aspect theory and the concept of trauma. And my approach was that the conditions of maltreatment in aspects where one planet can be severely injured by another form the signature of traumas that people experience in their life, whether they're physical or mental or emotional or come from past lives or karmic patterns or simply from this life. The maltreatment helps you focus in on a hot spot, a core wound, a deep issue, and then allows you to give appropriate advice for treatment that may go beyond astrology if it's deemed necessary. Okay. So it being a very useful tool for the counseling astrologer, and especially the modern counseling astrologer who's dealing with psychological issues. These techniques can help clarify their own recognition of the astrological symptoms of painful circumstances and trauma.
Okay, so using ancient predictive techniques
Right.
in order to get a clear idea about a person's life, and then using modern counseling and psychological approaches in order to help actually give them some advice or some healing for those issues.
Exactly. And so, as we revive the ancient astrology, I don't think any one of us is saying that we have to go back to how it was done 2,000 years ago within that context, but that the gems of that system, thoroughly understanding that, can help enrich the contemporary practice and contemporary issues.
Definitely. And what's your second talk at the conference?
It's on the daimon and the 11th and 12th houses. Okay. And that each of the houses was named. The 11th house name was the good daimon, and the 12th house the bad daimon. So I go into a discussion of the concept of the daimon that many astrologers here have been talking about. Dorian spoke about it, and Marcus Patchett spoke about it, and I've seen one other lecture that is referring to it as well, beside myself. But that these are the houses of friends and enemies. And so I go through a philosophical, religious, artistic, mythological introduction to the concept of the daimon, and then demonstrate how a traditional astrologer would interpret the topic of friends and then the topic of enemies. And I'm using the charts of Bill Clinton, who had lots of friends, and of Donald Trump, who has lots of enemies,
Okay.
as my example charts.
Interesting. Okay, that's exciting. And do you have anything else, or what are you excited about in the future? Do you have any other events or anything coming up this year?
Well, yes, I have in the end of September the third annual Hellenistic Astrology Retreat that will be taking place in Portland, Oregon. This year it's going to be on an in-depth study of interpreting the 12 houses and of looking at a planet in a house and the houses it rules and its own domicile lord and how all of those are integrated into its agenda and how well it can bring forth what it's trying to do for the individual.
Okay.
But then the flip side of that is taking each house individually, and if clients ask about, well, tell me about marriage or about children or wealth or health, how to approach each house on its own, and using these techniques to be able to give some insight into how those matters will turn out.
Brilliant.
Yeah.
That sounds exciting. So where can people find out more information about your work?
On my website, www.demetrageorge.com.
Okay.
And then finally, in May of 2019, I'll be leading another tour to Greece. This time will be in northern Greece on the Greek mysteries, which are the Eleusinian and Dionysian and Orphic and Samothracian. So those details are also on my website under tours.
Brilliant.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thanks for talking with me
Okay,
today.
thank you, Chris. It's been a pleasure.